Hello and welcome to yesterday's Airlines. The Gemini Jets October release announcements have just dropped a day or two ago. Can you contain your excitement? I don't know. They look pretty exciting. Not especially. But hey, we've got, I think, 9 new releases from Gemini this month to check out. So obviously, before you get pre-ordering, I'm sure you want to hear what I've got to say about them. So let's check out in this video what Gemini are offering this month. Now, before I get started, obviously, subscribe to the channel, people, if you haven't already. Check out my Facebook and Instagram profiles at Yes Airlines. Lots of content posted on there, which usually links back to the website, yesterdaysairlines.com. And lastly, 400 Scale and Detail, great Facebook group to discuss 400 scale aviation without some of the bozos who make everyone's life challenging. Okay, so let's get on to looking at this month's Gemini Jets releases. As I said, 9 releases this month, and to be honest, it's a very Gemini set of airline choices, and one which focuses heavily on the United States, which again isn't really a surprise for Gemini. That is Gemini's prime territory. So we've got American Airlines, Alaska Airlines, Delta Airlines, United Airlines, plus a bit of Braniff, which is at least a nice change. And then we got a couple of Europeans, and of course, drumroll please, Emirates. So we'll start off by looking at the American Airlines A319. This is, what's the part number for this one? It is GJAAL2084, and the reg is N93003. It is an A319-115, and of course it has sharklets, and of course being 115, that means that this thing has also got CFM56 engines, which means you have to contend with the fact that the CFM56 engines on all the Gemini and JC Airbuses are too large. It isn't the end of the universe, I admit, but they are too large. The mold has actually been a little bit improved by JC. They've slightly manicured the nose. I think they've slightly modified the nose gear too. It has been looking better in recent releases, I admit. Still, obviously, way inferior to the Panda A319 and now the NG A319. And arguably the Aero Classics A319 as well, even though that doesn't have aerials and has weaker gear. Also, this is not a unique release from Gemini, which you probably won't be surprised to hear. They have released this model before, at least one which is almost exactly the same, but it was 4 years ago that they released that. I wonder if this model was made 4 years ago and was in the factory. Interesting to know that. I might be able to tell if the nose still looks a bit wonky, because looking at the last release in 2018, yeah, it's okay, but it shows a lot of the issues that I've rated. The engine's too big, the aerials are a little bit oversized, the nose is a bit, yeah, and the nose gear isn't great. So this is not going to be a masterpiece by any means. It's going to be a pretty standard Gemini release. It's not new, it's not inspirational, it's not particularly great mold, but it isn't awful either. And if you missed out the first time round, and you haven't got an AA319, and you didn't buy one of the other versions that's available, because I think Aero Classics has made this already, then, hey, you might want to get this one. So for me, this one is going to go up into Workhorse. Not dreadful, not great. Next up, we're moving on to Alaska Airlines, one of Gemini's favourite airlines, one that it's released a lot of models for in the past. This is a Boeing 737-890 with the winglets. It's GJASA2122, and the reg is N570AS. It's wearing the Honouring Those Who Serve colours, which is a nice special scheme from Alaska. Very patriotic, as American Airlines love to be. I really like the winglets actually with the US flag. They look really cool. But this model has been made recently by somebody else. You know who I mean. And you almost certainly own it if you wanted the Alaska Honouring to Serve 737. Because NG have made it. Probably it wasn't too long ago. And let's face it, the NG 737-800 drop kicks the jcwings Gemini 737-800 way off out of the park. The GJ737 is mediocre. It's got a pointy nose, it's got oddly angled wings, it's got oversized gear. It's just not great. And looking at the last Gemini release on Alaska 737-800, which wasn't that long ago, you can see kind of what I mean. Compare that to the recent NG 737-800, and it is clearly a vastly better mold. So regardless of the paint, the mold is so much better that I'd go for the NG anyway, personally. But I don't think NG made a mess of the model anyway. So yeah, I guess Gemini probably had this in the backlog for a while, and it's just taken a while to get it out. But I don't really see why you'd be buying this myself. The mold is mediocre. It's been done before better. This is Gas Guzzler. Next, we've got Gemini's vintage retro release for the month. Gemini has decided in recent times to start producing Lockheed Electras again. Or actually, I can say again, it's never technically made one before. It did make one Aero Classics mold version a long, long time ago. This mold is actually a little bit better than the old Aero Classics mold, but it isn't perfect. And Gemini's renditions so far have been poor. The Eastern variant had really weird cockpit windows. I think I've complained about this before. The most recent, which was American Airlines, looks okay in Gemini's photos, but everything looks okay in Gemini's photos because they always show the model from an angle where you can't really tell anything about the model. But from what I hear, it spends a lot of its time sitting on its backside. So this is a real tail sitter, which isn't surprising because I've actually had problems tail sitting with this mold for the Electra previously on some JC versions I've got. So got to be careful with that. I like this scheme. It's a classic Braniff delivery scheme for the Electra. The reg is N9709 Charlie, and it ought to be okay, but Gemini have this habit of mucking the cockpit windows up, and of course the mold doesn't really sit level. I'm going to stick with my old Aero Classics version myself, and this one is going to workhorse. It slightly annoys me that Gemini are choosing Electras to do their retro models for, when I imagine almost everybody would prefer 727s or Convair 580s, which are going to sell better and haven't been made before. So it's a slightly odd choice from Gemini to do more Electras, but at least it's a retro aircraft. Okay, next up we're off to Europe, and it's more beach towels in the form of a Condor A321 in the new colours, the orangey yellowy version, which is registered DAIAD. It's hard to get excited. I keep on talking about this Condor livery in every video because so many people are releasing it now. I'm not going to talk about the livery again. Watch some of the other videos if you want to hear me moan about it or say nice things about it. I don't really care for it or not care for it. It's kind of, I'm ambivalent to it. But this is the third version of this aircraft. The third version. Phoenix made this, I think, last month, and I've just seen the pictures of that, and it looks okay for a Phoenix A321. Obviously, the wings even are completely incorrect, but it looks okay. It looks a little bit Tu-204-y as the A321s always do, but it looks okay. But NG also made it, I think probably the month before, and that one looks really nice. It's obviously got the right wings on it, and the mold's better. So, yeah. So I'm tempted to put this one into workhorse, but I'm also tempted to put it in the gas guzzler. And yeah, is it workhorse? Yeah, I might be harsh and put this into gas guzzler, to be honest. Again, it's been made before on a better mold and on a worse mold, but it's been made before. I'd have thought most people would have acquired one of those earlier versions if they wanted this model. Who's going to be waiting specifically for Gemini to do it? They need to get these models out, you know, to compete earlier, I guess, now that they've got proper competition coming along. Next up, it's just rinse and repeat. This is a Delta Airlines A321. This one's a Neo. It's N501DA. All the same things to be said. The mould is okay, but it's not great. The engines, being Neos, are vastly too large on the JC Gemini, and it's been made before, lots before. Panda models have made this before, the same reg, and so have Aero Classics. The Panda one looks spectacularly good. The Aero Classics one looks, yeah, okay. This one will be fine, I'm sure. But it's not going to be as good as the Panda one. If you wanted this reg, you should have bought the Panda one. NG have also made an A321 Neo, different reg, N502DX. So it's been made 3 times, effectively, previously. Do we need Gemini to make it on what is an okay but not outstanding mould? Not really. But it is strictly, you know, well, not strictly, but it's slap bang in their territory. Obviously, Gemini have got a relationship with Delta, which they've been trying to use in licensing. But yeah, once again, it's just going to be an ordinary model. I'm going to put it in gas guzzler because all the reasons I've talked about: repetition, mediocre mould, giant engines. Not exciting. So far, this month is looking really not great, in my opinion, for Gemini. It's probably the worst month they've had in a while, and they only produce a relatively small batch of models. So they've got 4 models to go to rescue this month in my eyes, which I'm sure they really, really care about. Next up is another Delta. And this one is... In fact, no, we won't talk about Delta next. I lie. Next up, we'll talk about Emirates, because there's nothing more Gemini than Emirates. And what we've got here is another A380. This one is registered A6 Echo Echo Whiskey, and it's wearing these Dubai Expo colours, which talk about being part of the magic. Are you excited? The scheme is colourful, I'll give them that. But once again, this model is clearly being made for Emirates, and they actually have made exactly the same scheme, just on A6 Echo Echo uniform, this very year. This very year. So obviously they're selling, Emirates are ordering, but how many collectors are buying these? Can't be that many, I'd have thought. Certainly not the second release. The mould, the JC Gemini A380, it's okay, but it's obviously inferior to the Phoenix one. It's obviously inferior to what Aviation 400 are going to be producing, albeit neither of them have made this scheme. But Gemini have, so you probably already own it, and if you didn't buy it previously, you're not going to buy it now. So, yeah, I'm going to put in the workhorse because, hey, this is the definition of workhorse for Gemini. This is the thing that keeps them in business, probably, making models for corporate customers, of which Emirates and Gemini are hand-in-glove best buddies. So there's nothing wrong with that. You know, they want to make models for Emirates, that's great. Emirates want to make models for them, that's great. Everyone's happy. But slipping them out amongst your 9 or 10 releases a month is a little cheeky, probably. Couldn't you have it as an extra model? Because, you know, people don't need it. So, workhorse for me. Okay, next up is that Delta 757, which I almost talked about, but then chose not to. It's a 757-300, so that is cool. Nobody else has a working 757-300 mould. It is merely a stretch of the old Gemini 757-200, so it's still a seamed mould, though the seam is quite discreet. JC have gone around and updated this mould quite heavily with new undercarriage, which isn't bad, though is a little bit stalky, I find, even for a 757. And these 757-300s therefore have potential. I don't understand why NG have not made a 757-300, incidentally. I'd have thought, considering that they've often created all the other variants and the 757 was their first mould, that a 300 would have been, you know, quite high on their list to do, but it doesn't seem like something they're interested in. So for the time being, Gemini have this space all to themselves, and they've been certainly using it when it comes to Delta, because I'm looking through the releases here and I'm seeing a lot of Delta 757-300s. I'm seeing one model made without winglets in 2010, which looks quite good with the old style in the garage. I'm seeing, how many others are there here? They made one in 2014, they made one in 2015, and they made one in 2018, and they made one in 2021. So they've made 4 Delta 757-300s with winglets. There's obviously a lot of people out there who want to buy these models. And they made one a long time ago without winglets. So this is a really standard release for Gemini in the sense that they've made it 4 times previously. They've picked another rego here, N590NW this time round. You know, if they hadn't made it previously, I'd be saying really nice things about this model probably, but they have, it's a workhorse. It's a workhorse, man, because it's just another remake of a model they've made lots. But the other 757-300, this one is more interesting, and this one is United Airlines, registered N75854, and this is a 757-300 in United colours wearing the new Evo blue scheme. So this one has not been made before. They have made United 757-300s before, but they're wearing this livery. So finally, after how many releases here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The 8th release is something that hasn't been made before. And thank the Lord for that. So this one I think will be nice. It's new, it's on a decent mould. Not such a good mould that I think I can make the Supersonic, but it's an okay mould with the updates. And I like the scheme. And it's nice to have something out there which isn't just the same as every other aircraft type you see at the airport. 757-300s at least look different with that crazy length thing going on. So for this one, this one's getting up into high flyer, no problems. Gemini have chosen one interesting model this month so far. Well done, Gemini. So bringing up the rear is the last model of the month, and that is a KLM cargo. Technically it's Martinair, I think, but it's wearing KLM colours. PHCKC, and this is an interactive series 747-400 freighter. I actually saw this aircraft just the other day at Amsterdam Schiphol, so that's really cool. I've said nice things about the interactive series before. I know not everyone loves them, but I do. I think they're awesome. And this is a really nice mould. I got the China Southern one a month or 2 ago, and I don't know, if you've read the review that I wrote about it, it didn't score that well, but only because there was some QC issues, not because there was anything bad about the livery or the mould, which I think is great. So this one's cool. I think this one's excellent. This is probably the best model this month because it has this combination of being unique. Nobody else has made, I think, a KLM cargo 747-400F, unless Phoenix have produced some abomination for it, which is possible, I guess. And at the same time, it's interactive. I'm just checking to see whether Phoenix have made an awful, awful freighter version. Oh yeah, they have. They have. They've made an awful freighter version. But ignore that because it's a piece of junk. So this one will be much better. Gemini, I've got a great mould. Interactive is cool. This one gets up into Supersonic, finally, because of all those cool reasons I've mentioned, this is going to be a good model and one I hope keeps our Dutch friends happy. So that is my look around this month's Gemini Jets releases. It's a boring month for Gemini. I often think Gemini months are quite boring, I admit, because I like collecting classics and obscure airlines and Chinese airlines and stuff that Gemini doesn't make. That doesn't make Gemini models bad, but what is a criticism that you can level at Gemini here is that they are remaking things that other people have made better. Yeah, that's it. It's as simple as that. They're making that Alaska 737-800, they're making this Delta A321, and making that Condor A321. And the versions that are around already are better. And then if you look at the rest of the releases, the American A319, the Delta 757, and the Emirates A380, they made themselves before. I mean, they're just competing against themselves at this point. So you know, how can you be excited? Even the brand new electric is going to be just bang average, I imagine, and I'm certainly not going to replace the Aero Classics version I have. So it's just not very good. But occasionally there are still gems. The United 757 is, I'm sure, a model that will make people happy. The KLM Cargo 747 should also. And I guess, you know, some months just can't be particularly exciting. But this is probably the worst month since I've started doing these videos, which admittedly isn't a long time. But yeah, personally, I'm not overexcited by the releases this month. So hopefully next month's Geminis will be more interesting. But that's it from me this month. I know some people think I love NG models and therefore I hate Gemini. That's not true. I don't like these Gemini models because they're not very interesting and they're likely to not be particularly good. Some of them, though, however, will, as my ratings show. So you go and buy what you want to buy, but be warned. Anyway, see you next month.